Find themselves in a situation not that different from the situation we find ourselves in, where the gap between rich and poor gets wider and wider, the power imbalance gets worse and worse, until you have a society so divided that you forget that the resources and the power of that society are such that there is no reason for there to be such tremendous poverty. It's not about a lack of resources, it's about a mismanagement of those resources and a mismanaged sense of priority, of the fact that more resources gathered in the few is not the most sensible way to run a civilization. The law of the jungle is kill or be killed and only the strong survive, and that's not the law of humanity. Our species is about watching out for each other, taking care of the old people, taking care of the young people, educating, and the way to do that is all of us democratically taking part in deciding how our resources are managed. This country was founded on the ideal of no taxation without representation, and that's a good ideal. And right now we're in a situation where the idea of taxation and representation has gotten so far out of whack with what we actually need. The idea of taxation and representation hand in hand is the idea of managing the resources of society in a way that everybody participates in and is for the good of all. So here's a story about the French Revolution. The King of France was absolute, the people all were destitute, the year was 1789. Churches paid no income tax, neither did aristocrats, and wars were costing money all the time, but that sort of thing never happens anymore. Enlightenment ideas had entered people's ears, like liberty, equality, and brotherhood, till people starved and broke under feudalism's yoke, knew that no church or king was gonna do them any good. Till there was such financial crisis, the king had to take advice to try an old thing called the States General government. The Estates General had 3 votes, nobles, church, and common folks. So 2-1, the commons lose, it always went. The commons in frustration said, we represent the nation. The nobles and the church must lose their privileges. And the rich were scared for real when they stormed to the Bastille, and rebellions also broke out in the villages. And at the palace in Versailles, the king and queen were heard to sigh, I guess we have to let them make a constitution now. But then the Women's March embarrassed them and chased them into Paris, and the royals learned they'd lost their power anyhow. Arguments got hot whether to keep a king or not. Different groups saw different ways to run the country best. But when the royal family tried to flee the country in disguise, they were busted and then put under a house arrest. And all of Europe's kings were terrified to hear these things. So France was threatened on all sides by enemies. And when these other kings declared the King of France had to be spared, that made the King of France look worse to the revolutionaries. They built a new machine, the quick and painless guillotine. They said it's fairer than the king's medieval torture rack. They put it to a boat and then they dropped it on his throat, and every king across the world just had a heart attack. So they attacked from north and south and they attacked from east and west, till revolutionary France was in a desperate state. And when the radical Marat was killed politically, now that was what it took for France's outlook to degenerate. The new leader, Robespierre, said enemies are everywhere, and for a year the guillotine was working endlessly. And though he freed the slaves, it's true, Robespierre's head came off too. Then France was run by the more moderate Directory. But the Directory was lame, and France's only good news came from their armies out in Europe, winning more and more. And the man who made them win was General Napoleon, but when he came back home he made himself the emperor. So it was a painful climb to get from kings to modern times, but the French Revolution always showed the way. Because the ideas that sparked it first have never been reversed. It was the biggest change that shaped our Western world today. And I'll leave you with one more little bit of memorable information. At some point in the 1960s, Chu En-lai was asked what he thought the importance of the French Revolution was for human civilization and development. I suppose this might have been around 1965 or so. And his response was that it's too early to tell. So I think right now we're still seeing the ongoing ripples of what the ideas and the ideals of the French Revolution and the American Revolution actually mean for the human race, as our power to create resources and our power to lessen the amount of physical labor needed to provide ourselves with what we need from the earth. These increases in technology require a rethinking of how to manage those resources, because there is enough to go around. We no longer need all of that to be funneled into a few people at the top, leaving the rest of us to do all the labor. The advances in technology should result in more freedom for everybody, and they have, only to the extent that we've been able to grasp that power and force it to happen. So that's what you guys are all a part of here, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.